Tonight, the American economy.
We want to be a country where where you can raise a family on one sole income.
How average families are dealing with growing debt in America. And
the best way to avoid war is strength. Reagan said it best, peace through strength.
How the U.S. military is making its might known in the Middle East. Plus, an escalating situation in Haiti. The latest as gang violence overruns the island. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. An uncertain economy leaves Americans swiping to spend. Welcome, everyone, to Faith Nation. From the CBN headquarters in Virginia Beach, I'm Wendy Griffith, in for John and Jenna. Well, Americans hit a new high in credit card debt. That surge means their overall balance shot above $1 trillion for the first time. Hillary Powell is examining this trend. Hillary, welcome to Faith Nation. Is this affecting how people are paying bills?
Good question, Wendy. Well, there are historic highs for these credit card rates, but the New York Federal Reserve reports that generally people are still able to pay their bills on time, and that's for now. There's actually more credit card accounts open to the tune of 70 million more since the pandemic, and that's really impacting how families are choosing to spend.
Well, Hillary, when you add in elevated interest rates...
Credit cards are increasingly being used to pay down household bills. Experts say that could be the reason why credit card debt for families nationwide is unprecedented at a record-setting $1 trillion. CPA Howard Dvorkin says the use of plastic is back up after consumers took a pandemic pause on spending.
People are subsidizing their normal costs, their normal living expenses, using the credit cards. So maybe things were great 3 years ago, but now with the inflated expenses for groceries and fuel and all the other expenses and travel, I have to say, because the airports are very busy, they're using the credit cards to pay for it.
Other balances such as retail stores, consumer loans, and car loans add to the household balance sheet, as well as financial frustration. A recent Debt.com survey reports Americans who admit feeling stressed after using credit cards is up 15% since last year. The federal government is in the same boat with the U.S. Congressional Budget Office, projecting the national debt to be nearly twice as large as the entire U.S. economy in 30 years. Congress could slow that trend by cutting spending. One suggestion from the CBO, however, mentions limiting Social Security as an option, which won't be popular with politicians in an election year. The office also warns higher debt can erode confidence in the U.S. dollar. Dvorkin says before your next bill arrives, families should create a budget.
Maybe it's not the greatest financial planning thing that you've done, but it'll put a good ability for you to chart a path out of debt, out of financial stress, and figure out, okay, what's my next move?
Okay, and when you add in elevated interest rates, it becomes even more of a challenge to pay off all of this debt. Bankrate reports actually the average interest rate for credit cards right now is about 20%. So that's even more of a hard burden on families with a tight budget. Wendy?
Thank you so much, Hillary. Appreciate that. Well, with us now is David Bahnsen, Chief Investment Officer at the Bahnsen Group. David, the Biden administration touts a strong economy, yet some Americans are having to go into debt to get by, and that's at a time when interest rates are high. How did we get here?
Well, it's important to point out that Americans are always going into debt to get by, and to some degree. The issue is, are we seeing more of it than normal, and what is causing it? And I do believe that the $1 trillion figure being reached on credit card debt sounds really bad, and I wish that there was far, far less absolute credit card debt. But the right way to think about this is the debt divided by assets and the debt divided by income. right? If I told you someone had a $3 million mortgage and someone else had a $500,000 mortgage, you might think that the first person is worse off unless you knew that their house was worth 20 million and the second person's house was only worth 500,000, right? The denominator matters. That's what's happening, I think, since the financial crisis, that American households have actually delevered. The problem I have with the Biden administration's economic policies is not household debt, it's government debt. It's running up the governmental debt leverage that hurts growth going forward.
We're going to talk about that in just a second, but what are some of the pitfalls of growing reliance on credit cards?
First of all, the cost. It's extremely expensive debt. The interest rates on credit cards, because it's unsecured debt, usually people use their credit card for something that can't be repossessed or reclaimed later. So it's a high cost to run up credit card debt. But I think that another big factor, especially for young people that get into the credit card debt trap, is they become dependent on it. They start to think of the use of their credit cards as part of their monthly income or capacity for spending. And of course, that is a dead end. And so it becomes very expensive debt and really just is a trap people do not want to go down.
And David, as you mentioned, not only Americans have debt, but America itself has debt to the tune of $32 trillion. When you see this number, is there cause for concern?
Well, that's the only thing I'm concerned about. At the end of the day, it's the economic story of our time, that we have not just, again, a high debt level, but debt divided by, when you're talking about the country, we call it GDP. It's the debt relative to the size of the economy. I mean, we had trillions of dollars of debt, and it was really bad 20 plus years ago, but it was about 50% of debt to GDP. Now we're at 120% debt to GDP. So, you know, Japan has been well over 200% for a long time. They've had no economic growth for decades. Much of Europe is 170, 180% debt to GDP. That's the problem. It takes away future economic growth.
Okay, real quick, 30 seconds, David. What's the solution to fiscal uncertainty in America?
Well, the solution to fiscal uncertainty caused by excessive indebtedness is to, when you're in a ditch, quit digging. We absolutely have to get to a place of bipartisan support for a balanced budget. We have to spend within our means, and we have to have pro-growth economic policies to drive the income side, the economic growth that will enable us to deal with the debt.
All right. David, thank you so much for being with us today on Faith Nation.
Thanks so much.
Well, turning now to the Middle East, where more than 3,000 U.S. Marines have arrived for a new mission to help deter Iran from seizing and interfering with merchant ships in the Strait of Hormuz. This development is part of a growing U.S. military presence in the region, as national security correspondent Caitlin Burke reports. After years of attempts at diplomacy, the U.S. is now making a strong show of force.
While the U.S. may not be directly involved in any major regional conflict, tensions with Iran are only increasing. The Islamic regime continues to launch attacks on a key shipping route, in addition to ramping up its nuclear program. Escalations that now demand a renewed American presence in the region.
The best way to avoid war is strength. Reagan said it best: peace through strength.
Thousands of Marines, backed by U.S. fighter jets and warships, are deploying to the Persian Gulf, a display of military might that's long overdue, according to Nathan Sales, former ambassador-at-large and coordinator for counterterrorism in the Trump administration.
What Iran has seen so far from the administration is one after another episodes of turning the other cheek. That's a great way to live your life as a private citizen and as a Christian. That's not a great way to run foreign policy.
The latest slap involves the regime increasing its pattern of harassing and seizing ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that more than 20% of the world's oil must pass through. With Iran now closer than ever to weapons-grade uranium levels, the Biden administration has finally admitted efforts to revive a nuclear deal are done, and that option is no longer on the table.
I think the important question for us to be asking the White House is, what took you so long? It's not as if Iran has been dramatically worsening its behavior lately. This is all par for the course. We've looked the other way for a good 2.5 years.
Along with this military show of force, Gabriel Nerona, former State Department Special Advisor for Iran, says the administration is still offering Iran concessions, giving the regime an impression that it holds the leverage in nuclear negotiations.
The State Department is still trying to negotiate something where they give sanctions relief to Iran in exchange for Iran pausing its enrichment or doing a little bit less there.
Nerona tells CBN News that while China may be the administration's top priority, the U.S. response to Iran could make a major difference in how Beijing moves forward.
If the United States sets a red line over Iranian nuclear activity, that better be something that we're willing to actually enforce, because the results, if we don't enforce that red line, could be a completely green light to China to go and invade Taiwan.
Since the beginning of the year, we've also seen an increase in joint military exercises between the U.S. and Israel. Nerona and Ambassador Sales believe this sends a message of unity and support to allies in the region, while hopefully enabling them to step out and take on a larger role themselves. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, amid ongoing violence that just yesterday caused the closure of the U.S. Embassy in Port-au-Prince, an answer to prayer tonight in Haiti. A kidnapped American nurse and her young daughter have been freed after nearly 2 weeks of captivity. El Roy, the mission organization where Alex Dorsonville works, confirmed the news today, saying, quote, El Roy is a Hebrew name of the God of the Bible that means the God who sees. It is with that vision that we now rest upon God's truth, that, quote, in his kindness, God called you to share in his eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus. So after you have suffered a little while, he will restore, support, and strengthen you, and he will place you on a firm foundation. And that is 1 Peter 5:10. Elroy goes on to say, quote, we praise God that he has proven himself faithful as he restores, supports, and strengthens Alex and her family, the ministry of El Roy Haiti, and the community that Alex has impacted and continues to impact with her ministry there in Haiti. Well, here now for more is Gloria Rapica, the founder of Love and Hope Ministries, a missions group that works in Haiti. Gloria, first, what is your reaction to this great news that this American nurse and her child have been set free?
I'm very excited for what God has done. Most of the time, that's not the result of the stories, but this time we're happy that they are safe with family, and we are praying that God will see them to the journey ahead.
And Gloria, with this situation, this kidnapping and just the general violence and gang activity in Haiti, what drives you and other missionaries to stay in the area and continue your work, even though it's very dangerous?
I'm personally in the state now working with other Haitians. I'm very happy that the missionaries are in Haiti. For us, we are Love and Hope Ministry. Haiti is such a place of so many bad news. And our desire is to bring the good news of Jesus. Because in this situation right now, only Jesus can bring love and hope to the people in Haiti. That's
Amen.
what we do,
Amen. Well, how can we be praying for those doing the work in Haiti?
We do appreciate everybody who's concerned about Haiti. Pray that the Lord will turn the hearts of the people to Jesus so they can see, and us that are working in Haiti, that will continue to have boldness. It's very painful situation that God will give us the backbone not to give up, but to continue to instill hope in Jesus to the people.
And Gloria, is God saying anything to you? Is he speaking to you? Are better days ahead for Haiti?
I still have hope because God can turn everything around. And so that's why we continue to invest in children. We invest in pastors, helping people, because we know that God can change the situation at any time. There's always hope in Jesus.
Always hope. Gloria Rapica, the founder of Love and Hope Ministries, a missions group that works in Haiti. Thank you so much for being with us today on Faith Nation. God bless you.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, how a vote on changes to the Ohio Constitution could be a preview for the future of the abortion battle in America. Voters in Ohio overwhelmingly rejected a Republican-backed measure making it more difficult to amend the state's constitution. The issue one raised the threshold of votes needed to approve a constitutional amendment to 60%. Tuesday, about 70% of voters cast their ballots against that proposal, leaving the original standard of a simple majority vote. That will likely make it easier for a referendum on a constitutional amendment protecting abortion to pass this fall. Because of that, Tuesday's vote got nationwide attention.
This was a complex issue, and obviously there are a lot of folks who did not want this to happen, not just because of the November issues, but for all of the other ones that are coming. So lots of folks from around the country spent a lot of money to make sure this didn't happen.
In this off-year election cycle, Ohio will be the only state with abortion on the ballot in November. Well, in Hawaii, firefighters are battling winds from an offshore hurricane as wildfires spread across Maui. The high winds and flames have led to power outages across multiple communities, causing forced evacuations in some areas of the island. The fires have killed 6 people in Maui so far. With Hurricane Dora off the coast, wind gusts have prevented crews from utilizing helicopters to drown the flames. The Hawaii National Guard has been called in to help get the situation under control, but the weather is not cooperating. The National Weather Service has already issued high wind and dangerous fire condition warnings through Thursday. Our prayers are with the folks on Maui. I was just there, and it's just a shame to see this. Well, an overseas dividing line for Americans. How Russia's invasion of Ukraine has become a point of contention for the Republican Party. That's next. Welcome back. A major issue in the 2024 presidential campaign has become America's support for the war in Ukraine. Now it's a potential litmus test for Republican candidates. And as CBN chief political analyst David Brody explains, there are already clear divisions.
Typically, Republican presidential candidates court evangelicals by talking about their faith or socially conservative issues like abortion and others. And while that still is happening today, the war in Ukraine has sort of flipped the GOP script. It has now become a litmus test. Candidates who take a more hawkish viewpoint have become the minority this time around. Just ask former VP Mike Pence, who faced tough questions from Tucker Carlson at a recent evangelical forum in Iowa.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice President, have you, I know you're running for president. You are distressed that the Ukrainians don't have enough American tanks. Every city in the United States has become much worse over the past 3 years. Yeah. Drive around. There's not one city that's gotten better in the United States. Right. And it's visible. Our economy has degraded. The suicide rate has jumped. Public filth and disorder and crime have exponentially increased. And yet, your concern is that the Ukrainians, a country most people can't find on a map, who've received tens of billions of U.S. tax dollars, don't have enough tanks. Right. I think it's a fair question to ask, like, where's the concern for the United States in that?
Well, it's not my concern. Tucker, I've heard that routine from you before, but that's not my concern. Anybody that says that we can't be the leader of the free world and solve our problems at home has a pretty small view of the greatest nation on earth. We can do both.
It's a subject that's clearly not going away and will force some soul-searching among certain candidates. Not only did Carlson reflect the changing Republican base, Pence, once an evangelical hero, heard boos and received no applause. He, along with GOP presidential contenders Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, represent a more traditional neoconservative approach, something Haley addressed in an interview with CBN News.
Russia's not going to stop at Ukraine. They're going to go into Poland and the Baltics, and we've got a world war on our hands. We have to make sure we send a message to every enemy that if you mess with our friends, you're messing with us, and you don't want to do that.
Those views follow the Ronald Reagan model in terms of embracing a robust overseas strategy in order to protect America.
We in America have learned bitter lessons from 2 world wars. It is better to be here ready to protect the peace than to take blind shelter across the sea, rushing to respond only after freedom is lost. We've learned that isolationism never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with an expansionist intent.
That interventionist mindset continued through 9/11 with tough talk by George W. Bush against countries like Iraq, Iran, and North Korea.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
Back then, Americans saw the invasion of Iraq and the start of the war on terrorism in Afghanistan. In 2001, 96% of Republicans supported that war in Afghanistan. Oh, how times have changed. 20 years later, just 43% of Republicans saw that as a war worth fighting, signaling a growing move toward isolationism. After 9/11, 23% of Americans wanted less foreign involvement. Today, that number is at 30%. And within the GOP, a whopping 71% want the U.S. to focus on problems at home rather than overseas. When Donald Trump entered the picture with his America First agenda in 2015, the GOP base joined the move against foreign intervention. That's resulted in a new guard of presidential candidates joining Trump, including Ron DeSantis and political newcomer Vivek Ramaswamy.
I don't believe in beating around the bush on this. I don't think we should be spending more money in Ukraine. The top job of the U.S. military, who would have ever thought, is to protect U.S. soil.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, David. A traffic stop turned into a heroic rescue. That's next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, the quick thinking of a New Mexico State police officer is being credited with saving the life of a newborn baby. The heroic rescue happening just feet from a hospital. Officer Ismael Perez was on patrol when he saw a car run a red light, then turn into the hospital parking lot. Perez approached the car to find a man and his wife who had given birth in the front seat, but the baby wasn't breathing. He jumped into action, patting the baby's back to clear his throat. Seconds later, the baby started crying, and Perez handed the newborn over to his parents. Well, the father, or to the nurses rather, the father of three says he was thankful to be a part of the beautiful moment. And look at that baby. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. We will see you tomorrow. God bless.